Hello, welcome back. My name is Yuna and I am so excited for today's video. This is probably the video that made me want to make a channel because 2025 was coming to an end and I was thinking about my favorite books of the year and realizing that I had no space to scream my feelings into. And I just have so many feelings about these books and I have to get them out of my body before I combust. So, all that to say, today's video, I'm going to be sharing my 12 favorite books from 2025. Don't ask me to pick a number one favorite for just about anything because I am very bad at that. But I think at the end of the video, I might try and pick like my top 3, but we'll see. So these aren't ranked in any way. I have them piled here in a mess and I'm just going to kind of pick at random and talk about them one by one. And I'm so excited. All right, let's get started. The first book I'll talk about is, let's go with this. This is a beloved in many book spaces, but number 1 is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. It is such a weird, bizarre experience, and it's probably why I loved it so much. The premise of the book is essentially, it's like a sci-fi fantasy lit fic romance, and there are 2 characters, Red and Blue, who are agents on opposite sides of this time war. There are these 2 entities, companies, agencies that are fighting each other across different braids in time and jostling for control over different timelines and realities. And these 2 agents are essentially, they're fighting each other in the beginning, but what they end up doing is building a relationship over the course of letters that they leave for each other at different points in time. And they develop this beautiful sapphic, we love a sapphic romance, through these beautiful just letters filled with yearning and purple prose. And I will say I'm not always the biggest fan of purple prose or very overwrought writing, but it just worked for me in this. It worked for me. And one of the things I love about this book that may be what is so off-putting for a lot of people is that the world building, the authors do not hold your hand. This is the type of book where the author is trusting you to use your imagination, to make connections, to fill in gaps, and to maybe let go of some of the minutia or details that you can't really make sense of or you don't understand. Yeah, it's definitely one of those books that is an experience and you sort of have to be willing to be swept up in the experience and not get tripped up being like, well, how does that work? Or what does that mean? Or who is this? You know, it's an exercise in letting go. This particular passage isn't very purple prosy, but it gives you an idea of the sort of time-crossing, world-shattering yearning. Red is writing to Blue and she says, I love you. I love you. I love you. I'll write it in the waves, in skies, in my heart. You'll never see, but you will know. I'll be all the poets. I'll kill them all and take each one's place in turn. And every time love's written in all the strands, it will be to you. Like, why is it always what you do and are you up and not these beautiful, heartbreaking letters? This is also a pretty short read, so it's easy to get through. I would highly recommend for anyone who's down for a trippy, romantic, time-jumping experience. So that's number 1. Second book I'm going to talk about is a bit of a shift in tone, and that is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abuawa. This book is a gut punch and a half. It's about Nar, who is a Palestinian woman, and the book essentially follows her life and her experiences as a displaced person. And when you start the book, Nar is actually in solitary confinement in an Israeli prison, and she is telling you about her life story. I believe she begins her life born in Kuwait to Palestinian refugee parents, and she ends up being displaced again to Jordan and then eventually finding her way to Palestine. And I love Nar. She is foul-mouthed, she is sharp-tempered, she is witty, she is gritty, but she also just has this huge wide heart, and the love and respect for Palestinian people and their resilience and their spirit is just etched all throughout this book. And the last chapter, I can't remember if it's the last chapter, the last part of this book where something happens, I was weeping, deeply unwell. needed to be sedated type of thing. I won't read you something from inside, but I'll read you part of the blurb on the back. And it says, written with Susan's richly detailed, beautiful, and resonant prose. Agree. This powerful novel presents a searing and unique portrait of a woman who refuses to live with shame or to be anyone's victim. And it's absolutely true. I would recommend this to anybody, and prepare tissues for the end. Moving to number 3, let's do let's do this one. All right, so this is a contender for top 3 spot, and that is There by Tommy Orange. What is in my eye? This is his debut work. I've also read the follow-up Wandering Stars, which is it's right there. They're both amazing. This is probably my favorite, but they're both beautiful. This book is told from the point of view of 12 individuals. They're all Native Americans living in Oakland, or they're either living in Oakland or they're traveling to Oakland for the big Oakland powwow. It's a look into their lives, their histories, the way that their lives connect, and the climax happens at this powwow where they all end up gathering, and it's so powerful. It says, together this chorus of voices tells the plight of the urban Native American grappling with a complex and painful history, with an inheritance of beauty and spirituality, with communion and sacrifice and heroism. The last passage in this book, I won't read it obviously because it's a huge spoiler, but the last passage in this book, just looking at it makes me emotional because I cried for so long. Wow, I wish I could talk about it, but I can't without spoilers. This book is just so gritty and raw and difficult and honest. And it doesn't shy away from touching on a lot of the issues that present day Native communities are facing, all of the echoes and repercussions of the history of genocide and assimilation and racism and bigotry. It all sort of filters in through the pages through these 12 characters. And yeah, the last page, the whole book is so beautifully written, but the last page, transcendent, incredible. Please read it. Beautiful, beautiful book. And like I said, the follow-up Wandering Stars has some of the same characters and is also a deeply moving read. All right. 4th book. Not every book that is in my favorites for 2025 are books that made me weep uncontrollably and cry in the fetal position. This one is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, which I'm sure many people know and have already read, but this is so good. There's a reason that people rave about it and why it is so popular. I've read this. I've read the sequel, which is actually a prequel, the Bookshops and Bone Dust. Also a great time. This is a cozy fantasy that follows Viv, who is a orc, right? She's an orc, and she used to be a mercenary adventurer, and she's decided, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm tired. It's time for a new life. And she decides to open up a coffee shop. Basically follows her as she is, opening up the store, trying to establish a business, making relationships. And while it is low in plot and low in stakes, I guess, it is not at all low in engagement. The characters are so heartwarming and endearing. It's just such an easy read. The writing style is pretty straightforward, but Travis Baldree does such a good job at pacing and flow, and it just is very easy to binge this book. And my favorite character probably in this book is a little mouse. It's a little mouse guy who bakes, and he's so stinking cute. On the back it says, by T. Kingfisher, this is a warm hug of a book, and I absolutely agree. I think that if you like D&D like I do, I'm a huge D&D nerd, by the way. Me and my friends play several campaigns. We go to live D&D shows. I watch so much D&D. Basically, this was the perfect book for me in terms of cozy fantasy because it very much hit those D&D vibes. And I would absolutely recommend for anyone who just maybe wants to slow down and still read a well-written book with great pacing and fun characters and very believable world building. So, Legends and Lattes. All right, moving along. Number 5, let's do boop, 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 boop. All right, let's do A Closed and Common Orbit. Wait, did I say that right? A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in Becky Chambers' Wayfarer series, and this is a series that convinced me that I need to read more sci-fi. I've never been like a huge sci-fi reader, but I am now a sci-fi girly thanks to Becky Chambers. The whole Wayfarer series, it's 4 books and they are all standalones in the same universe, and there's some crossover of the characters, but it's very Star Trek-y. You're out in space, there's several different alien species, and it's kind of hard to explain because these books, some of them have almost no plot. It's very slice of life, just following the interactions and lives and thoughts of these different characters and different species. But what I love about the entire series is that Becky Chambers uses aliens, right, as sort of a way to examine the things that we as humans and as people have deemed is normal. Things that we think are just standard, are normal, are just how things should be. She challenges a lot of those by introducing alien species that have different cultures, different expectations, different ways of doing things. You know, there are species in these books from being a parent is an occupation. You know, you have a child and then you give that child to a professional parent. In our world, we'd be like, that's crazy. That's so jaded and disconnected. How could you do that to your kid? Again, I'm rambling. All that to say, the series has so much heart and really asks you to think about what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, to connect, to feel, to live and engage with others who don't think or look or feel or eat or exist the way you do, how to find connection even in those weird circumstances. This book specifically is the second book in the series, and it follows Loveless, who is a character from the first book, and Pepper, who is a new character. And it's about the two of them kind of learning to coexist and also going on a sort of separate adventure while simultaneously getting background stories. It's so good. Loveless is actually a ship AI, and so through her eyes, you see her trying to navigate how to communicate to people the way she's experiencing, the way she thinks about emotion, about bodies, about perception, about processing information, because she does it so differently from everyone around her. And, you know, I think it's such an exercise in compassion, in being open, and in honest and vulnerable communication. The story itself, because this one does have more of a plot than I think any of the other books in the series, it's so beautiful. And Pepper's story, again, it made me cry at multiple points. I read the first book in the series and I immediately messaged 2 of my dear friends who love Star Trek and sci-fi, and I told them, I was like, you have to read you have to read these books, you're gonna love them. And they did. Yeah, I would recommend this to anyone who enjoys sci-fi or anyone who maybe doesn't think they like sci-fi. These might change your mind if you don't mind not having the biggest plot and it being more of an introspective sort of character study. But it's not at all boring because, like I said, there are aliens, there's different species, there's different worlds, there's a lot to keep you engaged, even if maybe it's not the most plot forward book in the world. And actually the bit on the back describes it better than I am, and there's a quote that says, "Sweeping in scope but human at heart, A Closed and Common Orbit is a very moving examination of what we all crave most, acceptance." Yeah, so what they said. Yeah, so this is number 5 on my list of favorite books of the year, and also a contender for top 3 probably. 6th on the list is going to be Almond by Won Pyun-sun. And this is a translated work from Korean, and I actually have the Korean version here. Funny story, I read this book and I loved it, and I decided I wanted my mom to read it, so I actually got the Korean version for her to read. I also do want to read it, but I got it for her to read, and she hated this book. She read it and she was like, what was the point of that? That was so stupid. I don't understand what the author was trying to say. So tastes are different even between family. But I liked the book a lot. The book is about a boy named Yoonjae who is born with a condition that makes it so that he can't feel emotions like fear or anger. He has a hard time understanding emotion, expressing or feeling emotions. And it's all because a tiny part of his brain that is the size of an almond. When you start the book, he's living with his mom and his grandma, and they're trying their best to help him navigate the world and interactions with people and society, being who he is. But after an event in the book, he is left to try to navigate that on his own, and he ends up meeting a teenage boy named Kun, who is kind of the polar opposite of him. Kun has big emotions, explosively expresses his feelings, and it's about their relationship and how they come to understand each other and help each other even though they are so different. It's about what it means to connect to other people, the value of, I think, relationships, what it means to be a person, what it means to be a friend. So yeah, I thought it was a great read, even though my mom hated it. Yeah, that is the 6th book, and I do hope to read it in Korean at some point. I think that Korean is such a beautiful poetic language, and there are phrases and emotions and sayings that have no translation in English. But I'll read English translations of Korean, and this is not a dig at the translators. I just think there's something that is lost in that process, because I'll read a lot of Japanese or Korean translated lit, and I think a lot of times feels rather dry, or the prose ends up feeling like detached and dry, and it's a weird phenomena that I don't fully understand, but I would like to read it in Korean just to get the full experience, and maybe I will do that and report back. But number 6 is Almond. Halfway there. Oh, I'm thirsty. Okay, let's keep going. So number 7. So I talked about this book in my ratings video, and this was my example of a 5-star book. And that is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad. Yeah, I can't beg people to read this book enough. This is a nonfiction work that is essentially examining the pain and cognitive dissonance of living in a society during the genocide of the Palestinian people, and trying to not lose your mind when you're looking around at a world and systems and individuals who are so comfortably complicit in the mass killing of an entire people. He just put into words so many of the tumultuous feelings and conflicts that I was having, and it's just, I think, such an important book for our time. It's very honest and difficult and poignant, and I think I cried from cover to cover. It's also pretty short, so it's easy to read. Well, no, it's not easy to read. It's incredibly difficult to read, but it's a short book, so you won't be in pain for like 600 pages. I saved some passages that I wanted to read. I might cry doing it. I'll probably cry doing it, but it's just so beautiful. Here's one. What art does is meet us at the site of our insanity, our derangement, the plainly irrational mechanics of what it means to be human. There comes from this, then, at least a working definition of a soul, one's capacity to sit with the mysteries of a thing that cannot in any rational way be understood, only felt, only moved through. And sometimes that thing is so grotesque, what we do to one another so grotesque, that sitting with it feels like an affront to the notion of art as a conduit of beauty. Still, sit. Sit. I'm like, okay. The girl on the stretcher believes she has ended. A man says to her, Intizai al-Amar. You are like the moon. Again, translation fails. There is no English equivalent to the lineage of this phrase, a lineage that runs through generations of old movies and love songs and family gatherings. Listen to the sly setting joy and pleading, raw pleading that carries the words as this man tells the girl who lived when so many others died that she is beautiful beyond the bounds of this world. Yeah. Now, book number 8. I have Redemptor by Jordan Ifueko. This is the second book in Jordan's Raybearer duology. And there's 3 books in that universe, and I've read all of them and loved all of them. And honestly, any of them probably could have been on this list, but I'm going to hold up Redemptor because it is one of my favorites. They're all my favorites. The Raybearer duology is following a young girl named Tarisai who has been raised in isolation by her mother and then tasked with befriending and then assassinating the crown prince. In this universe, which is the world is African inspired, and in this world, the king, the prince, the ruler has a council. I believe, is it 11 or 12 people who are essentially bonded to the king or prince through a power called the Ray, and they become closer than family. It's a very close bond, and they are able to do things like communicate telepathically, know how each other is feeling. So yeah, Tarisai has to try to become one of the council members and then kill the crown prince. And it's the story of her journey and what she discovers. All of Jordan's books are written with such beautiful, lush prose. The world building is incredibly textured and believable. The sights, smells, feelings, like it's all so beautifully described. You know, the characters are very interesting and lovable. So Redemptor is the only YA book on my favorites list, and for a good reason. Although it is a YA series, and you know, it does read like YA, Jordan tackles some incredibly complex and heavy topics in her books, topics that I think are very important for young people to discuss and be exposed to. There are things like anxiety, asexuality, different types of platonic intimate relationships, what it means to be in love with your friends platonically, what it means to not want to have children or not have a maternal instinct, relationships with toxic parents, disability justice. There's just a lot that is woven so expertly into the experience of the characters, and I was just very happy to see those things included. Yeah, I think that the whole series is really beautiful, and I absolutely went out of my way to get the UK covers. Let me pull the other. Yeah, because I thought the UK covers were so much prettier than the US ones. I hope that it picks up on like the foiling. It's so beautiful. I love them so much. Not that the US covers are ugly, but they're like a little less pretty in my opinion. So, okay, book number 9. 9? 10? 9. 9. We have Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. Now, this is the third book in the Greenbone saga, and I adore that whole series. It is so freaking good. So the Greenbone saga is a trilogy that follows the members of the Call family, and the Call family is one of 2 main family clans that exist on this island of Kekon, and the 2 clans are vying for control over territory and resources. Kekon is an island where you can mine jade, and jade is a substance, it's a stone that grants certain people who are compatible with it superhuman ability, so they can have superhuman strength, speed, endurance, etc. It essentially, follows the Call family and 3 siblings in the Call family as they're sort of navigating these clan dynamics and political machinations. It is a multi-generational story, so it spans, I'm not sure, maybe like 20, 30 years. It spans an amount of time, so you're with this family for a good chunk of their lives, and the character work is so impeccable. You have really complicated characters, insanely morally gray. There are so many points at which I'm like, to my favorite character, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, bruh. It's incredibly engaging. It's sort of like a Hong Kong mafia movie meets Godfather meets superheroes. It's just such a good time. I will say that when it was described to me, or recommended to me on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and someone explained that it's like a urban fantasy mafia clan battle type of setting, I was like, that doesn't sound interesting to me at all. Like, it doesn't sound like a book I would vibe with. I was so wrong. The pacing is great. The prose is pretty straightforward, but still very easy to read and very fun to read. And Jade Legacy is the last book in the series, and the payoff, the plot payoff, the character arc payoff is top tier. I don't know how Fonda Lee did what she did, how she set these characters up for these storylines, for these arcs, but wow, she got me. This book was, it had me on the edge of my seat, and it had me in tears. It had me gasping. It had me biting my nails. But I would absolutely recommend this series and this book for anyone who is interested in sort of a multi-generational story, family relations, family drama, morally gray characters, and you like action, well-written action scenes, martial arts. Read this. Book number 10. We're in the double digits. So number 10, I have I have Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. This is Caleb's debut work. I also read his more recent release, Small Worlds, and they're both beautiful. And Caleb has become an auto-buy author for me. He just has such a distinctive writing style and voice and cadence. This book is about two young, beautiful Black people falling in love. And it's a story about what it means to try to be Black and beautiful and exist in a world that doesn't want you to be free or doesn't want you to thrive. Narrated with deep intimacy, Open Water is at once an achingly beautiful love story and a potent insight into race and masculinity that asks what it means to be a person in a world that sees you only as a Black body. Caleb's writing style might not be for everyone. It's very musical, it's very poetic, and it's very repetitive, and it has a rhythm and a cadence to it. And you'll find certain phrases or words repeated in such a way that it almost feels like you're listening to this long form poem or song. For me, I loved it. For other people, I don't know if it'll be for you, but I think if it's for you, it'll really be for you. I'll read this one passage with a trigger warning that it is a scene of a young Black man being assaulted by police officers. So if that's something that you don't want to hear, please skip this bit. He was trying to fly away towards a freedom he knew could only be found in the distance between hunter and prey. A nudge, and he was sprawled out on his back, wings splayed, head at a peculiar angle, a part of him forced into where he couldn't fit. Arms, too, twisted behind his back as blows rained down from black batons painting beautiful skin with fresh wounds. Flashes of darkness where the light was leaving him. There was no blood. Death is not always physical. Yeah. What I think is so beautiful about this book is that while it is exploring some very dark topics about mental health and racism and police brutality, it still is very much a joyful exploration of life and love at the same time. There's a lot of gentleness, there's a lot of tenderness, and yeah, I would definitely recommend checking this out. Again, it's a pretty short read, so it's easy to get through. Second to last, I am losing my voice. Let's do this one. Number 11, I have The Kingdom of Gods by N.K. Jemisin. Now, N.K. Jemisin is a pretty beloved author, and I had seen her Broken Earth trilogy get recommended left and right, and I do have it. I'm going to get to it this year, but I'm a save the best for last type of person. So what I decided to do was read the rest of her books. I think I read them in publication order before I got to the Broken Earth trilogy. And this is the third book in the Inheritance trilogy, which is her debut sort of series. I hadn't heard many people talk about it, so I didn't have low expectations because I knew that N.K. Jemisin is a very acclaimed writer, but I didn't have particularly high expectations, and I absolutely fell in love with this series. I love the Inheritance trilogy, and it is one that's actually very hard to describe, partially because of how N.K. Jemisin writes. She doesn't use traditional narrative structures. She loves to experiment with the structure of her books, and it's such a good time, but it does make for an experience that's hard to translate succinctly. The Inheritance trilogy is essentially the story of a world where there are these three major gods and many godlings, and it's about their interactions with the rest of the world, with mortals and humans, and what that relationship sort of looks like. What is very interesting about the series is that it's not a traditional series in that book one flows immediately into book two and so on. Book one ends, I believe there's a 10-year gap before book two. Book two ends, and I believe there's a 100-year gap before book three. So there's a lot of jumping around, but characters do continue through. And this book, which is, again, the third book in the series, is my personal favorite. And it follows Sia, who is one of the godlings, and he is in the first and second book, and he's one of my favorite characters. He's the godling whose nature is the embodiment of childhood, and he's a very complex little guy. This is really about him and his experience in the mortal world and his relationships with other godlings, with the gods, and with humans. I think that if you are someone who is interested in exploring the nature of gods, the strangeness of gods, the unknowable sort of quality of immortal beings, then I think you would really enjoy this series. One of my pet peeves is when I read books about characters that are supposed to be like thousands of years old, or they're immortal, they're these gods, but really they just kind of read like some dude. Like it's supposed to be like a 2,000-year-old god of mischief, but he just reads like some guy that you might run into at Wawa. But these gods and godlings are so intriguing. Their morality, their relationship to mortality, to time, to existence, to each other, it's very different from the humans in this world and from just me as a person. So I found that just endlessly intriguing to read about. And N.K. Jemisin's prose is so beautiful. Just love it. I eat her books right up. I think whether or not you've read the Broken Earth trilogy, this is definitely worth picking up. And yeah, an incredible time. Do recommend. It was a big surprise to me. Okay, last book, 12th book on my list, and actually the most recent book that I read amongst this group, and it is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. Now this is book 2 of the Farseer trilogy, and also book 2 of the Realm of the Elderlings. The Realm of the Elderlings is a sort of classic medieval high fantasy epic, and it is 16 books long, but it's broken up into 5 sub-series. The general story, the overarching plot, which again I haven't finished the series, I've only read the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy, but I think the story basically follows this character Fitzchivalry Farseer and another character, the Fool, as they are living their lives in this world with magic and a lot of political turmoil. Fitz is connected to the royal family, so there is a bunch of tension that results from that. Now, what happened is I read this first trilogy, the Farseer trilogy, and decided that I'm going to pause reading The Realm of the Elderlings because, again, like I said, I am a save the best for last type of person, and I could already tell, I can just tell in my bones that this is going to be like peak reading of my decade, if not maybe my life, in terms of fantasy epic reads. And so I decided I'm going to pause on The Realm of the Elderlings, and I will revisit it maybe towards the end of the year, or into next year. I don't know. Listen, I just need something to look forward to in my life during these dark, depressing days. I just like knowing that eventually I will get to this and be able to enjoy myself. Now, all that to say, the first trilogy, it's very slow paced in the first book. There's not actually a whole lot that happens in terms of plot. You're just kind of getting to know Fitz, the main character, and setting up for what's going to be the rest of the story. But you get introduced to Fitz, you get introduced to the Fool, who is probably my favorite character so far. They are such a weird, bizarre, endearing, lovable, snarky little character, and I love them. Fitz also bonds with a wolf through a power called the Wit, which he can communicate with animals, and the wolf, Night Eyes, has my whole heart, and if anything happens to him, I'm going to be devastated. So if anything happens to the Fool or to Night Eyes, I'm going to riot. This is a very nostalgic sort of classic fantasy feel. And Robin Hobb has beautiful prose. It's not overly lyrical, but it's very impactful and measured, and she really knows how to use her words. The characters are... There's some characters who are less so, but generally they're very multidimensional. They're very lovable, even when they are very flawed and believably human. The world building is very sophisticated, very elegantly done. At the end of this book, I did cry, so the emotional impact was absolutely there. Like I said, I liked it so much that I decided not to keep reading for now, which doesn't make sense, but it makes sense to me. So anyway, that is the last book on my list of 12 favorite books from 2025. Now I'm going to see if I can pick my top 3. Okay, that was so painful because I love all these books so much, but pretending that I have a gun to my head and I have to pick my top 3. I'm not ranking these. Again, this is just a group of my favorites. So I have There by Tommy Orange, A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, and One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar Al-Akkad. So, can I do this? Yeah. These are my top 3 favorite reads of 2025. And I would beg you to read them. But again, all of these books were so incredible, and I just had an incredible reading year. I don't know how 2026 is going to top this reading year because I just read some absolute bangers, absolutely heart-wrenching, gut-punching, tear-jerking, life-changing books. But, we'll see what we can do. I'm going to put on the screen some honorable mentions because, like I said, I read 204 books. And while these are my 12 favorites, there were so many that I thought were really wonderful. And I'm not going to talk about them because otherwise this will go on forever. I'll probably mention them in future videos with some more dedicated, curated lists. But here you go. Here are some other books that I thought were absolutely fabulous and would also recommend for you to read. All right, we are done. That is it. I just have so much love for these books, and it was starting to boil over and take over my life if I didn't put it out into the world somehow. So I'm just glad I got to do that. I think that my next video is going to be less of a love fest because it's going to likely be my most disappointing reads of 2025. So if you're down for a little bit of criticism and maybe a little shit talking, then I would suggest you check that out. So yeah, I hope to see you in that one. Bye.